Imagine finding a single penny in an old jar and realizing it was minted while the world was at war, quietly passing through American hands as history unfolded. That penny might be a 1942 Lincoln cent with no mint mark, and its story is far more fascinating than its simple copper color suggests. The 1942 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced in the United States during one of the most dramatic years in modern history. When people talk about a no mint mark penny, they're referring to a coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint. At that time, Philadelphia did not use a mint mark, so the absence of a letter under the date tells us exactly where it was made. This humble coin was part of everyday life, yet it carries the weight of a nation on the brink of massive change. To understand this penny, we need to step back to 1942. The United States had just entered World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor in late 1941. Factories were shifting to wartime production, millions of Americans were joining the armed forces, and everyday materials were becoming increasingly important. Copper, the main metal used in pennies, was suddenly in high demand for ammunition, wiring, and military equipment. Despite these pressures, the U.S. Mint continued producing Lincoln cents in 1942 using the traditional bronze alloy. This decision would soon change, but in 1942, Americans were still holding familiar copper pennies in their pockets. The Lincoln cent itself had already been around for more than 3 decades by 1942. First issued in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure. By the early 1940s, the design was well known. On the front, Abraham Lincoln faces to the right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, liberty to the left, and the date to the right. On the back, the design shows 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, with E pluribus unum across the top. This is why collectors often call it a wheat penny. One of the most interesting features of the 1942 no mint mark penny is its metal composition. It is made of about 95% copper, with the remaining 5% being tin and zinc. This gives the coin its warm reddish-brown color when new, which gradually darkens over time. This is especially important because just 1 year later, in 1943, the mint would switch to steel pennies coated in zinc to save copper for the war effort. That makes the 1942 penny one of the last regular copper cents before that historic change. Design-wise, the coin might look simple, but small details matter. The portrait of Lincoln was designed by Victor David Brenner, and his initials, VDB, appear on the reverse at the bottom, between the wheat ears. These initials were once controversial in 1909, but became a permanent feature. On well-preserved 1942 pennies, you can still clearly see fine details like Lincoln's coat, hair, and the sharp lines of the wheat stalks on the reverse. When people ask why a 1942 no mint mark penny might be rare or valuable, the answer depends on condition and special characteristics. In general, millions of these coins were made, so most circulated examples are not rare. However, finding one in excellent condition after more than 80 years is a different story. Coins that were never heavily used, especially those with original red copper color, are much harder to find today. Errors also play a big role in value. During wartime, the mint was under pressure to produce large numbers of coins quickly. This sometimes led to mistakes. Some 1942 pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is shifted to one side. Others show doubled features, where parts of the lettering or date appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment in the die. These errors can make a common penny suddenly very interesting to collectors. There have also been cases where 1942 pennies were struck on the wrong type of metal, though these are extremely rare and usually discovered decades later. Any unusual weight, color, or magnetic behavior can be a sign that something special is going on, and such coins often require professional examination. When it comes to real-world value, most circulated 1942 no mint mark pennies are worth only a few cents to perhaps $1, depending on condition. However, well-preserved examples tell a different story. Coins graded in high mint state condition by professional grading services can sell for tens or even hundreds of dollars. In rare cases, a nearly perfect example with full original red color has sold at auction for several $100s. Era coins from 1942 have sold for even more, sometimes reaching into the thousands, depending on the type and severity of the error. Identifying a genuine 1942 no-mint mark penny is relatively straightforward, but it's important to be careful. First, check the date. It should clearly read 1942 with no sign of alteration. Next, look below the date. If there is no letter, that confirms it was made in Philadelphia. The coin should not be attracted to a magnet since it is copper-based. If it sticks to a magnet, something is wrong because steel pennies were not made until 1943. Weight is another clue. A normal 1942 copper penny weighs about 3.11 grams. A significant difference could indicate damage, heavy wear, or an unusual error. Also, examine the details. Genuine coins will have sharp, consistent lettering and a natural look to the metal. Fakes or altered coins often show uneven surfaces, strange textures, or incorrect colors. One surprising fact about the 1942 penny is how closely it connects to daily life during World War II. These coins were used to buy newspapers filled with war headlines, candy bars for children whose parents were overseas, and stamps for letters sent across the ocean. Each coin is a small witness to history, having passed through countless hands during a time of uncertainty and sacrifice. Another fun detail is that many people saved copper pennies during the war years, anticipating that metal shortages might make them valuable. While most of those saved coins were spent later, this habit explains why some higher quality examples still exist today. It also adds to the story of how Americans thought about money and materials during wartime. Collectors love the 1942 no-mint mark penny for several reasons. It represents the final chapter of the classic copper wheat penny before the dramatic steel cent of 1943. It's affordable for beginners, but still offers challenges for advanced collectors who seek top-condition examples or rare errors. It also fits perfectly into historical collections focused on World War II or early 20th century America. Beyond value, there's an emotional appeal. Holding a coin from 1942 is like holding a small piece of history that survived one of the most intense periods the world has ever known. It's a reminder that even ordinary objects can carry extraordinary stories. So the next time you come across a simple brown penny dated 1942 with no mint mark, take a closer look. It might not make you rich overnight, but it carries the weight of history, craftsmanship, and a nation at war. And sometimes that quiet story is far more valuable than the number stamped on its face. Have you ever looked at a penny and wondered if it had quietly witnessed history, passed through thousands of hands, and somehow survived long enough to sit in a jar or drawer today? The 1954 D. Lincoln penny is one of those coins that looks ordinary at first glance, but the deeper you look, the more stories it begins to tell. This coin is officially known as the 1954 D. Mint Mark Lincoln 1 cent. It is a small copper coin with Abraham Lincoln on the front and two simple wheat stalks on the back. Millions were made, millions were spent, and yet today, collectors still search carefully through old pennies hoping to find a special example of this very coin. To understand why the 1954 D. Lincoln penny matters, we need to go back to the mid-1950s in America. The country was in a period of recovery and growth after World War II. Factories were busy, cities were expanding, and everyday transactions relied heavily on coins like this one. Pennies were not souvenirs or collectibles. They were tools of daily life, used to buy newspapers, candy, and postage. In 1954, the United States Mint was producing Lincoln pennies at 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The small letter under the date tells us where each coin was made. The D mint mark on this penny means it was struck at the Denver Mint in Colorado. Denver was responsible for producing huge quantities of coins to keep up with demand in the western United States. The design of the coin itself had already been around for decades. Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. The front of the coin shows Lincoln's profile facing right, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. This was the first time a real person appeared on a circulating U.S. coin, making the Lincoln cent a historic design from the very beginning. The back of the 1954 D penny features the famous wheat ears design. 2 wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America. This design symbolized growth, strength, and the agricultural roots of the nation. It was used from 1909 until 1958, just a few years after the 1954 penny was minted. In terms of metal, the 1954 D. Lincoln penny is made mostly of copper. At the time, pennies were composed of about 95% copper, with the rest being zinc and tin. This gives the coin its warm reddish-brown color, especially when it has been well preserved. Copper prices were stable in the 1950s, and no one imagined that the metal itself would one day be worth more than the coin's face value. So if millions of these pennies were made, why do collectors care about the 1954D? The answer lies in condition, detail, and small variations that separate ordinary coins from collectible ones. While the total number minted was very large, most were heavily used. They were scratched, worn, and darkened by decades of circulation. High-quality examples are far less common than the original production numbers suggest. One important factor collectors look for is how much original detail remains on the coin. On Lincoln's face, sharp lines in the hair, ear, and coat are signs of a well-preserved coin. On the back, clear wheat lines and strong lettering matter. Coins that still show a bright red color, known as red cents, are especially desirable because copper naturally darkens over time. Another reason the 1954D penny attracts attention is the existence of minting errors and variations. During the 1950s, coins were struck using hand-prepared dies, which sometimes resulted in small mistakes. One of the most famous varieties for this year is the repunched mint mark. This happens when the letter D was stamped more than once into the die, creating a slightly doubled or shifted appearance. These details are small, but collectors love them because they show the human side of minting. There are also examples with weak strikes, off-center strikes, or minor doubling in the lettering. While these errors do not make every coin valuable, clear and dramatic errors can significantly increase a coin's worth. Each error tells a story of a moment when the minting process did not go exactly as planned. When it comes to value, the range for a 1954D Lincoln penny is wide. A heavily worn coin that has been in circulation for decades is usually worth just a few cents. These are common and easy to find. However, a coin in uncirculated condition, especially one with strong red color, can be worth much more. Collectors have paid tens of dollars for clean, well-preserved 1954D pennies graded in high mint state condition. In exceptional cases, coins with near-perfect surfaces and original color have sold for hundreds of dollars at auction. Error varieties and repunched mint mark examples can also command strong prices, depending on how clear the feature is and how well the coin has been preserved. Knowing how to identify a genuine 1954D Lincoln penny is important, especially as interest in coin collecting grows. Start by checking the date carefully. The numbers should look clean and consistent with the style used in the 1950s. Then look just below the date for the small D mint mark. It should appear natural, not scratched in or oddly shaped. The weight of the coin is another helpful clue. A genuine 1954 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. While slight variations are normal due to wear, a significant difference could indicate damage or an altered coin. The color should also match aged copper, ranging from brown to reddish-brown, depending on condition. Magnification can help reveal important details. Under a simple magnifying glass, you can inspect the mint mark, lettering, and edges. Look for smooth, natural wear rather than sharp tool marks. Fake pennies are rare, but altered coins do exist, especially when someone tries to add or change a mint mark. One surprising fact about the 1954D Lincoln penny is how often it still turns up today. Many people inherit jars of old coins or discover rolls tucked away in drawers. Because pennies were saved casually, not as investments, some excellent examples have survived unnoticed for decades. This makes searching through old pennies feel like a treasure hunt. Another interesting detail is that this coin represents the final years of the wheat penny era. Just 4 years later, in 1959, the design would change to the Lincoln Memorial reverse. The 1954D penny belongs to a design that connects early 20th century America with the modern age. Collectors love the 1954D Lincoln penny because it is approachable. You do not need to be wealthy to own one, and you do not need advanced knowledge to appreciate it. It is a coin that invites curiosity. Beginners enjoy learning to spot details, while experienced collectors look for top-quality examples and rare variations. There is also a strong emotional connection to this coin. For many people, pennies like this were part of childhood memories, allowances, and everyday life. Holding one today feels like touching a small piece of the past, a reminder of a time when a single cent had real purchasing power. As interest in historical coins continues to grow, the 1954 D. Lincoln penny remains a favorite. It offers history, craftsmanship, and the excitement of discovery all in one small object. Whether found in a collection, inherited from a family member, or discovered in spare change, it encourages people to look closer and ask questions. So the next time you see a penny with the date 1954 and a small D beneath it, take a moment. That little coin has traveled a long road through American history. And who knows, the one you are holding might be better, rarer, or more interesting than you ever expected. Sometimes the greatest stories are hiding in the smallest places. Imagine holding a penny that looks ordinary, yet quietly represents the very end of an era in American history. A coin struck at a moment when change was coming, but few people noticed. Today, that small copper coin from 1958 with a D mint mark tells a story far bigger than 1 cent. This is the 1958 D. Lincoln penny. At first glance, it may seem like just another old coin you've seen in jars, drawers, or inherited collections. But behind its familiar face is a fascinating place in U.S. history, a connection to one of America's longest-running coin designs, and a reason collectors still pay close attention to it today. The 1958 D. Lincoln penny was struck in Denver, Colorado, as indicated by the small letter D just below the date on the front of the coin. It belongs to the famous Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1958, this design had already been in circulation for nearly half a century, making it one of the most recognizable coins in American pockets. The year 1958 itself is important. This penny was minted during the final year of the original Lincoln wheat cent design. Just 1 year later, in 1959, the reverse would change forever, replacing the wheat ears with the Lincoln memorial. That means every 1958 Lincoln penny, including the Denver minted version, marks the end of a chapter in U.S. coinage history. To understand why this coin matters, it helps to look at the world in which it was made. The United States in 1958 was a nation in transition. The post-war boom was slowing, the Cold War was shaping daily life, and Americans were entering a new modern age. Coins like this penny were part of everyday commerce, passing through countless hands in grocery stores, gas stations, and movie theaters. The Denver Mint produced a large number of Lincoln pennies in 1958, well over 800 million pieces. Because of that, the 1958 D penny is not rare in the traditional sense. Many examples still exist today, especially in worn condition. But rarity is not always about how many were made. It's about condition, history, and what makes a specific coin stand out from the rest. The 1958 D Lincoln penny is made primarily of copper. Its composition is 95% copper, with the remaining 5% made up of tin and zinc. This solid copper makeup gives the coin its rich reddish-brown color when new, a look that collectors often describe as warm and classic. Later pennies would shift away from this composition, making older copper cents especially appealing to many collectors. On the front of the coin, you'll see Abraham Lincoln's right-facing profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. This portrait is simple but powerful, capturing Lincoln in a calm and dignified way. Just above his head is the word liberty, while the phrase "In God We Trust" runs along the top edge. The date 1958 appears on the right, with the D mint mark just below it. The back of the coin features the iconic wheat ears design. Two curved stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America. At the top, the national motto E pluribus unum ties the design together. This reverse had been used since 1909, and for many collectors, it remains one of the most beloved designs ever placed on a U.S. coin. When it comes to unique features, most 1958 D pennies look very similar. However, collectors pay close attention to strike quality, color, and surface preservation. Coins that were struck cleanly, with sharp details in Lincoln's hair and beard, are far more desirable than worn examples with flat or blurry features. Unlike its famous cousin, the 1958 penny with no mint mark and a dramatic double die error, the 1958 D penny is not known for major headline-making errors. That famous double die coin was struck in Philadelphia and is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Still, minor errors can exist on Denver minted pennies, including small die cracks, off-center strikes, or weak lettering. These subtle variations can add interest and sometimes value. So why would anyone consider the 1958 D Lincoln penny valuable? The answer lies in condition. While circulated examples are common and usually worth only a few cents, high-grade coins tell a different story. Pennies that have never been used in circulation, especially those with bright red copper surfaces, can command significant premiums among collectors. Professional coin grading services evaluate these pennies on a scale that measures wear, luster, and overall eye appeal. A 1958 D penny graded in top mint condition can be worth many times its face value. Coins with sharp details, full original luster, and minimal marks are especially sought after. Auction records show that while most 1958 D pennies sell for modest amounts, exceptional examples have reached impressive prices. High-grade specimens certified by major grading services have sold for hundreds, and in some cases over $1,000. These are not everyday coins, but they prove that even a common date can become valuable when preserved perfectly. Collectors love the challenge of finding these high-quality examples. Many were lost to circulation long ago, making truly pristine coins harder to locate as time passes. That scarcity in top condition is what drives demand and keeps interest alive. If you're wondering how to identify a genuine 1958 D Lincoln penny, start with the basics. Check the date carefully. It should read 1958, with a small d just below the year. The mint mark should look natural and well integrated into the coin, not added later or oddly shaped. The coin should feel solid and have a copper color consistent with older cents. If it looks unusually light, shiny, or oddly colored, it may be altered or not authentic. The weight should be close to 3.11 grams, which is standard for copper Lincoln cents of that era. Examine the details under good lighting. Look at Lincoln's face, especially the hair and beard, and the wheat ears on the back. Genuine coins will show fine lines and texture, even if worn. Fake or altered coins often lack these subtle details. One common point of confusion involves the famous 1958 double die penny. Remember that rare and extremely valuable error does not have a D mint mark. If you see a 1958 penny with a D, it is not that famous error, no matter what claims you may hear. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1958 D Lincoln penny. Because it's the last year of the wheat cent design, many collectors see it as a symbolic goodbye to a classic era. It represents the end of a design that survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and decades of social change. Another interesting detail is that many 1958 pennies were saved by the public. People knew a design change was coming in 1959, and some chose to set aside rolls of pennies as souvenirs. That's one reason uncirculated examples still appear on the market today. Collectors also enjoy comparing the Denver minted pennies to those made in Philadelphia and San Francisco in the same year. Each mint had its own subtle characteristics, giving collectors plenty to study and appreciate. Today, the 1958 D Lincoln penny holds a special place in collections. It may not be the rarest coin, but it's a meaningful one. It connects everyday Americans to a turning point in U.S. coinage and offers a reminder that even the smallest coins can carry big stories. For new collectors, this penny is approachable and affordable, making it a popular starting point. For experienced collectors, high-grade examples offer a serious challenge and a chance to own a beautifully preserved piece of history. The next time you come across a jar of old pennies, take a closer look. That 1958 D Lincoln penny might not make headlines, but it represents the final chapter of a beloved design and a moment frozen in copper. And sometimes, the most interesting stories in coin collecting aren't about instant fortunes. They're about history, detail, and the quiet thrill of discovering something meaningful in the palm of your hand. Keep looking, keep learning, and you may be surprised by what an ordinary penny can reveal. If you have a jar of old pennies at home, there is a good chance one small coin from 1962 is hiding in plain sight, quietly waiting to be noticed. At first glance, it looks ordinary, but under the right conditions, this penny can surprise people who never expected value from a simple 1-cent coin. Today, we are talking about the 1962 D mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin many Americans have handled, spent, or ignored, yet one that carries history, craftsmanship, and in certain cases, real collector value. The 1962 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint in Denver. The small letter D beneath the date tells us exactly where it was made. This coin belongs to the famous Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1962, the Lincoln penny had already become a daily part of American life, passed from hand to hand in stores, pockets, and piggy banks across the country. The year 1962 sits in a very interesting moment in American history. The United States was deep into the Cold War era. John F. Kennedy was president. The nation was experiencing social change, economic growth, and rising global tension. Everyday objects, including coins, reflected stability and trust in the U.S. economy. Pennies like the 1962 D were produced in massive numbers to meet everyday commerce needs, especially as the population and economy continued to grow. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of pennies in 1962. Because of that, many people assume this coin has no value beyond face value. That assumption is where curiosity begins. While most examples are common, some versions of this coin are far from ordinary. The 1962 D Lincoln penny is made from 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. This gives it a warm, reddish-brown tone when new, and a darker brown color as it ages. This copper composition is important because it represents an era before the U.S. Mint changed penny materials in the 1980s. Today, copper pennies are increasingly appreciated simply for their metal content and historical feel. On the front of the coin, you see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, liberty to the left, and the date 1962 to the right. Just below the date is the small D mint mark, showing it was struck in Denver. On the back, the design features two wheat ears framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, with E pluribus unum at the top. This is known as the wheat reverse, which was used from 1909 until 1958. However, here is a detail many people miss. The 1962 penny does not have the wheat design. It actually features the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. The Lincoln Memorial design replaced the wheat ears in 1959. On the back, you see the memorial building, with tiny details that even include a seated statue of Lincoln inside if you look closely. This design change is part of what makes the 1962 D penny familiar yet historically meaningful. It represents the modern Lincoln cent era while still being made of classic copper. So why would a coin struck in such high numbers be valuable? The answer lies in condition, rarity with imperfection, and mint errors. Most 1962 D pennies found in circulation are worn. They show dull color, scratches, and flattened details. These are usually worth only a few cents. But when a coin survives in near-perfect or perfect condition, the story changes completely. Collectors use a grading scale to judge coins. A 1962 D penny with full red color, sharp details, and nowhere can be extremely desirable. Coins graded mint state, especially those with bright red surfaces, are far harder to find than people expect. Many were spent immediately, others toned or darkened over time. Finding one that looks almost exactly as it did in 1962 is rare. Even more exciting are error coins. Some 1962 D pennies were struck with mistakes at the mint. These errors can include doubled letters, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, or die cracks. While these mistakes were not intentional, collectors love them because each one tells a story of the minting process. For example, a repunched mint mark happens when the D was stamped more than once in slightly different positions. To the naked eye, it may look normal, but under magnification, you can see doubling or shadowing. These varieties can sell for significantly more than a normal penny. There have been real auction results that show the potential of this coin. Circulated examples usually sell for a few cents to $1. Uncirculated red examples can sell for several dollars to tens of dollars. High-grade coins certified by professional grading services have sold for hundreds of dollars. In exceptional cases, nearly flawless examples have reached into the thousands when collectors compete for top-quality pieces. These prices depend heavily on condition, eye appeal, and rarity within the grade. This is why two pennies that look similar at first glance can have very different values. Because of these values, people often wonder about fakes. The good news is that fake 1962 D pennies are rare, but altered coins do exist. Some people add a D mint mark to a Philadelphia penny or try to make a damaged coin look like an error. To identify a real one, start with weight. A genuine 1962 D penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. The color should match aged copper, not bright orange or dull gray. The mint mark should look natural, not glued or carved. Under magnification, it should blend into the coin's surface, not sit on top of it. Professional grading services are the safest way to confirm authenticity and grade, especially if you believe you have a high-value example. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1962 D penny. In 1962, pennies still had real purchasing power. You could buy candy, postcards, or small items with just a few cents. Today, this same coin may be worth far more to a collector than it ever was in circulation. Another interesting detail is that the copper in these pennies is now worth close to their face value by itself. While melting coins is illegal, this fact adds to the fascination of Pennies 1,982 Lincoln cents. Collectors love the 1962 D penny because it represents the balance between everyday life and hidden potential. It is not a rare coin by production numbers, but it becomes rare when condition, history, and survival are considered together. It reminds collectors that valuable coins are not always ancient or exotic. Sometimes they are the ones we overlook the most. Today, collectors search rolls, estate collections, and old jars for high-grade examples. The thrill comes from knowing that a simple penny, untouched for decades, could still be waiting to be discovered. As you look at your own coins, remember this: every penny has a story. The 1962 D Lincoln penny tells a story of America in the early 1960s, of copper craftsmanship, and of quiet value hidden in plain sight. And the next time you see a small D beneath the date, you may pause just a little longer, knowing that history and possibility can live inside even the smallest coin. Imagine reaching into an old jar of pennies and pulling out a single brown coin that looks ordinary at first glance. No shine, no gold color, just a simple Lincoln penny. But then you notice a tiny letter under the date, a small D, and suddenly that ordinary coin starts to feel different. What if this common-looking penny has a story far bigger than its 1-cent face value? Today we're diving into the 1964 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that comes from one of the most important periods in modern American coin history. It's not a flashy coin, and it's not usually associated with million-dollar headlines, but it holds a quiet importance that collectors truly appreciate. And in the right condition, or with the right mistake, this penny can still surprise you. The 1964 D Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint in 1964, during a time of major change and uncertainty in the U.S. coin system. This was the final full year before the United States ended the use of traditional copper in pennies. That detail alone gives this coin a special place in history. The Lincoln cent design itself had already been around for more than 50 years by 1964. Abraham Lincoln's portrait first appeared on the penny in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. By the 1960s, the design was deeply familiar to Americans, showing Lincoln's profile on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. This was the same design people carried during World War II, the early Cold War, and the Civil Rights Movement. In 1964, America was growing fast. The population was increasing, the economy was active, and coins were in high demand. Vending machines, parking meters, payphones, and everyday shopping all required small change. The U.S. Mint needed to produce massive numbers of pennies, and the Denver Mint played a huge role in meeting that demand. That's why so many 1964 D pennies were made. More than 3 billion of them were struck in Denver alone. That enormous production number is one reason this penny is still commonly found today. But large numbers don't mean the coin is unimportant. In fact, they make it a perfect snapshot of everyday American life in the mid-1960s. The 1964 D penny is made of 95% copper, with the remaining 5% made of tin and zinc. This solid copper composition gives the coin a warm, rich tone that many collectors love. When uncirculated, these pennies can glow with deep red color. Over time, as copper reacts with air and moisture, the color turns brown, which is what most people see today. The design details are simple but meaningful. On the front, you'll see Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" along the top. The date 1964 appears to the right of Lincoln, and just below that date is the small D mint mark showing it was made in Denver. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands centered, with the words 1 cent and United States of America. One detail many people don't realize is that you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial on the reverse. That makes this one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. So if billions were made, why does anyone care about the 1964 D penny? The answer comes down to condition, errors, and history. Most 1964 D pennies circulated heavily. They were used for decades, tossed into drawers, dropped on sidewalks, and passed through countless hands. Because of that, finding one in pristine, untouched condition today is not easy. High-grade examples with full original red color are much scarcer than the raw mintage numbers suggest. Collectors look closely at surface quality. Sharp details on Lincoln's hair, clean lettering, and a smooth surface without marks can dramatically increase value. A worn brown penny might be worth only 1 or 2 cents, but a well-preserved, uncirculated example can be worth several dollars, and the finest known examples have sold for much more. At auction, top-grade 1964 D pennies graded by professional services have sold for hundreds of dollars. In rare cases, near-perfect examples with strong red color and flawless surfaces have reached prices over $1,000. These are not everyday finds, but they do exist. Errors add another layer of interest. Some 1964 D pennies were struck with mistakes that collectors actively search for. These include repunched mint marks, where the D appears doubled or slightly offset, and doubled die errors that show doubling in the lettering or date. These errors happen during the die-making process and are completely accidental. A genuine doubled die or clear repunched mint mark can increase a coin's value significantly, sometimes into the hundreds of dollars depending on clarity and condition. That's why collectors inspect these pennies carefully under magnification. When identifying a real 1964 D penny, start with the basics. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams and should not be attracted to a magnet. If it sticks to a magnet, something is wrong. The color should be consistent with copper, not silvery or unusually bright. Look closely at the mint mark. On genuine coins, the D is clean and well-shaped. Be cautious of altered coins where a mint mark has been added to a Philadelphia penny. Under magnification, fake mint marks often look rough, misplaced, or glued on. Also pay attention to the date. The numbers should be sharp and even. Altered dates usually show uneven thickness or tool marks around the numbers. One fun fact about the 1964 penny is that it marks the end of an era. Just 1 year later, in 1965, the U.S. Mint removed silver from dimes and quarters, and not long after, pennies began transitioning away from solid copper. That makes the 1964 D penny one of the last Lincoln cents made in the traditional way Americans had known for generations. Another interesting detail is that many people saved coins dated 1964 because they knew changes were coming. That's one reason uncirculated examples still exist today. People tuck them away in rolls and bags, hoping they might be valuable someday. Collectors today love the 1964 D penny because it represents a balance between history and accessibility. It's old enough to feel historic, but common enough that anyone can realistically find one. It's a coin that invites people into the hobby without intimidation. For seasoned collectors, it's a challenge coin. Finding the best possible condition, the brightest red color, or a legitimate error keeps the hunt exciting. For beginners, it's often one of the first older pennies they learn to recognize and appreciate. The 1964 D Lincoln penny reminds us that value in coin collecting isn't always about rarity alone. It's about story, condition, and connection to the past. This penny was in pockets during a time of major cultural change in America. It bought newspapers, candy bars, and cups of coffee. It passed through moments of everyday life that history books never record. So the next time you come across a 1964 D penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to look at it closely. Notice the copper color, the tiny mint mark, and the familiar face of Lincoln. That small coin carries the weight of an entire era. And who knows? The one you're holding might just be a better example than you think, waiting quietly to be noticed after all these years. What if the most ordinary penny in your pocket came from one of the most chaotic years in American coin history? A year so unusual that even the U.S. Mint struggled to keep up. Today, we're talking about the 1965 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks like just another old cent. But behind this small copper coin is a story of national panic, secret minting decisions, and a moment when Americans believed their spare change might soon disappear forever. The 1965 Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint during a time of major change. When you see no mint mark on a penny, it means the coin was made in Philadelphia. That was standard for many decades. But in 1965, that missing mint mark tells a much bigger story than usual. To understand this coin, we have to go back to the mid-1960s. The United States was facing a serious coin shortage. Prices were rising, silver was becoming more valuable, and people began hoarding coins. Everyday Americans were pulling change out of circulation, saving it in jars and drawers, convinced the metal itself would soon be worth more than the face value. The government was under pressure. Vending machines, parking meters, and cash registers all depended on coins. So in 1965, the U.S. Mint made drastic decisions to keep coins flowing. That year, silver was completely removed from dimes and quarters. $half were reduced in silver content, but the penny was different. The Lincoln cent remained mostly copper, just as it had been for decades. The 1965 penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving it that familiar warm, reddish-brown color when new. Another unusual decision was even more surprising. To discourage collectors from pulling coins out of circulation, the Mint removed mint marks entirely from most coins dated 1965, 1966, and 1967. That means pennies from Denver and San Francisco also appeared without mint marks in those years for other denominations. But Lincoln cents were only made in Philadelphia anyway. So the 1965 Lincoln penny with no mint mark wasn't just normal. It was part of a national strategy to keep Americans spending their change instead of saving it. The design of the coin itself is classic and familiar. On the front, you see President Abraham Lincoln, a design first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. His portrait faces right, with the words, "In God We Trust," above his head and "Liberty" to the left. The year 1965 appears on the right. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, which replaced the wheat stalk design in 1959. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated between the columns. Above the memorial are the words "United States of America," and below it, 1 cent. Nothing about the design screams rare, and that's exactly why this coin often gets overlooked. So why does the 1965 no mint mark Lincoln penny matter to collectors? First, it represents the end of an era. This penny comes from the last period when U.S. cents were consistently made of high copper content. Less than 2 decades later, in 1982, the mint switched to mostly zinc, making older copper pennies heavier and more desirable to many collectors. Second, 1965 was a year of massive production. Billions of pennies were struck to fight the coin shortage. Because so many were made, most 1965 pennies are still worth only 1 cent in circulated condition. But value changes when condition, errors, or unusual characteristics enter the picture. High-grade examples are where collectors start paying attention. A 1965 penny that has never been circulated, with full original luster and no visible wear, can sell for several dollars. In exceptional condition, professionally graded examples have sold for much higher amounts. At major coin auctions, a 1965 Lincoln penny graded in top mint state condition has sold for over $100. That might not sound life-changing, but remember, this is a coin that once passed through countless hands, bought a piece of candy, or sat unnoticed in a cash register. Then there are error coins. This is where the 1965 penny becomes truly interesting. Errors are mistakes made during the minting process, and collectors love them because they are unpredictable and limited. Some known errors from 1965 Lincoln pennies include off-center strikes, where part of the design is missing because the blank wasn't properly aligned. There are also double die errors, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled. These can be subtle, but once confirmed, they can dramatically increase a coin's value. Another rare category includes coins struck on the wrong metal. While extremely uncommon, a 1965 penny struck on a silver-colored planchet intended for another coin would be a major discovery and could be worth thousands of dollars. Because of these possibilities, collectors never dismiss a 1965 penny without taking a closer look. So how can you tell if a 1965 no mint mark Lincoln penny is real and worth examining further? Start with the basics. A genuine 1965 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. It should not stick to a magnet because copper is not magnetic. The color should be consistent with copper, not silvery or unusually dark unless it has toned naturally over time. Next, look closely at the date and lettering. Use a magnifying glass if possible. Doubling on letters like Liberty or In God We Trust could indicate a double die, but true doubling looks crisp and rounded, not flat or blurry. Also inspect the rim. Uneven edges, missing sections, or unusual thickness could signal an error strike. Be cautious of fakes or altered coins. Some people plate pennies in different metals or modify dates to trick buyers. If a coin seems too unusual, professional grading services exist to authenticate and evaluate it. Here's a surprising fact. During the 1960s coin shortage, some Americans believed the government would stop making pennies altogether. That fear led people to hoard cents by the thousands. Ironically, that hoarding is one reason so many 1965 pennies still exist today. Another fun detail is that the 1965 penny is heavier than modern cents. If you place it in your hand next to a newer penny, you can feel the difference. That weight comes from copper, and many people enjoy collecting these older cents just for that solid, old-fashioned feel. Collectors today love the 1965 Lincoln penny not because it's flashy, but because it tells a story. It's a snapshot of a moment when America's money system was under stress, when design decisions were influenced by public behavior, and when even the smallest coin reflected big economic changes. For beginners, it's an accessible entry into coin collecting. For experienced collectors, it's a reminder that value isn't always about rarity alone, but about history, condition, and context. And for everyday people, it's proof that something ordinary can become meaningful when you understand where it came from. So the next time you come across a 1965 no mint mark Lincoln penny, don't rush past it. Turn it over. Look closely. Remember the year it was made, the panic it survived, and the millions of hands it may have passed through. Because sometimes the most interesting stories in American history are hiding in plain sight, right there in your pocket, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. Have you ever looked at a penny and wondered if it might be hiding a secret worth far more than 1 cent? Today's story is about a coin that millions of Americans have held in their hands, spent without thinking, and almost never looked at closely. The 1968 D. Lincoln penny may seem ordinary, but once you understand its history and the rare details collectors search for, you'll never see this coin the same way again. The coin we're talking about today is the 1968 Lincoln 1-cent coin with the D mint mark. This small letter, located just below the date on the front of the coin, tells us it was struck at the Denver Mint. At first glance, it looks just like many other Lincoln pennies from the late 1960s. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait faces right, and the reverse shows the Lincoln Memorial. But this penny was born during a time of big change in American coinage, and that alone makes it important. To understand why the 1968 D penny matters, we need to go back to what was happening in the United States during the 1960s. This was a decade of economic pressure, rising silver prices, and major changes in how coins were made. Just a few years earlier, in 1965, the U.S. government removed silver from dimes and quarters. Pennies were also affected. Before 1982, Lincoln cents were mostly made of copper, and the 1968 penny still belongs to that era. The year 1968 itself is especially interesting because it marked the return of mint marks on U.S. coins. From 1965 through 1967, mint marks were removed entirely. This was done to discourage coin hoarding during a nationwide coin shortage. When mint marks came back in 1968, collectors paid close attention. For the first time in years, people could once again tell whether a coin came from Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. The Denver Mint was extremely busy in 1968. Over 2.8 billion Lincoln pennies were struck there that year. That number alone tells us something important. In general, the 1968 D penny is not rare in everyday circulated condition. You can still find one today in old jars, piggy banks, and inherited collections. But rarity in coin collecting is not always about how many were made. It's about condition, details, and mistakes. The 1968 D Lincoln penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. It weighs about 3.11 grams and has a solid, rich copper color when well preserved. On the front, or obverse, you'll see Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln, a design first introduced in 1909. Above Lincoln's head is the phrase, "In God We Trust," with the word liberty to the left and the date to the right. Just below the date is the small but important D mint mark. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial dominates the design. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. Around the edges are the words United States of America and E pluribus unum, with 1 cent centered at the bottom. This design was used from 1959 to 2008, making it familiar, but that doesn't mean every example is the same. One reason collectors pay attention to the 1968 D penny is the quality of minting. During this period, the U.S. Mint was producing coins at very high speeds to meet demand. That sometimes led to weak strikes, off-center designs, or small errors that slipped through inspection. While most 1968 D pennies are normal, a small number have noticeable mint errors that can dramatically increase value. Some of the most sought-after errors include doubled dies, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a misaligned die during striking. These are not the same as machine doubling, which is very common and usually not valuable. True doubled die coins show strong, clear doubling that looks almost like a shadow. On a genuine doubled die, the doubling is part of the design itself, not just a flat or smeared effect. Another valuable error is an off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin planchet is not properly aligned when it is struck. The result can be a coin where part of the design is missing, with blank space visible along one edge. If the date and mint mark are still visible, off-center 1968 D pennies can sell for significant premiums, especially when the error is dramatic. Collectors also look for clipped planchets, where a piece of the coin's edge is missing due to a cutting error during production. These clips can be curved or straight and are easy to spot once you know what to look for. A genuine clipped planchet will show smooth metal flow along the missing area, not rough damage. So how valuable is a 1968 D penny? In heavily circulated condition, most examples are worth only 1 to 3 cents. That may sound disappointing, but condition changes everything. A well-preserved, uncirculated 1968 D penny with full original luster and no wear can be worth anywhere from 10 to 30 cents, sometimes more. The real excitement begins with high-grade coins. Professional grading services use a scale from 1 to 70. On this scale, a 1968 D penny graded M-67 or higher becomes surprisingly scarce. In recent years, certified examples in M-67 red condition have sold at auction for several $100s. In some cases, prices have reached over $1,000 when demand is high and supply is low. Error coins can bring even stronger prices. A genuine doubled die 1968 D penny, depending on the strength and location of the doubling, can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Off-center strikes and dramatic clipped planchets have also sold for impressive amounts, especially when authenticated and graded. Because of these values, it's important to know how to identify a real 1968 D penny and avoid fakes or altered coins. First, check the weight. A genuine copper 1968 penny should weigh around 3.11 grams. Significant differences may indicate damage or alteration. Next, use a magnet. Real copper pennies are not magnetic. If it sticks, something is wrong. Look closely at the mint mark. On a genuine coin, the D mint mark is part of the original design and sits slightly below and to the right of the date. Added mint marks are a common form of alteration. These often look raised incorrectly, oddly shaped, or placed in the wrong position. When checking for doubled dies, use good lighting and magnification. True doubling will appear rounded and strong, especially on letters like "In God We Trust" or the date. Flat, shelf-like doubling is usually machine doubling and adds little or no value. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1968 D penny. This coin was struck the same year that major events shook the nation, including the Apollo space program's progress and dramatic social changes across America. While history books focus on big moments, coins like this one quietly circulated through everyday life, passing through millions of hands. Another interesting detail is that many 1968 pennies have darkened over time due to copper oxidation. Collectors often prefer bright red examples, which show the coin's original color. Maintaining that color over decades is rare, and one reason high-grade examples are so valuable today. Collectors love the 1968 D Lincoln penny because it sits at the crossroads of history and accessibility. It's old enough to feel historic, yet common enough that anyone can still search for one. It encourages people to look closer at their change, to slow down, and to learn. For beginners, it's a perfect entry point into coin collecting. For advanced collectors, it offers challenges in finding top-grade examples or rare errors. And for historians, it represents a moment when American coinage was adapting to economic realities. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1968 with a small d under the date, don't rush to spend it. Hold it up to the light. Look at the details. Check the condition. That tiny coin may not make you rich, but it connects you to a fascinating chapter of American history and a hobby built on curiosity and discovery. And who knows? The most valuable coin is often the one people overlook. The 1968 D. Lincoln penny reminds us that even the smallest pieces of history can carry stories, surprises, and value far beyond their face. Most people would never look twice at a penny dated 1970. It looks ordinary, it feels ordinary, and it probably sits forgotten in a jar or drawer somewhere. But what if I told you that one specific version of a 1970 penny has quietly become one of the most searched Lincoln cents among collectors, and that the small letter under the date changes everything? This is the story of the 1970 D mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that came from a turning point in American history, a time of change, uncertainty, and rising prices, and a penny that still sparks curiosity more than 50 years later. The coin we're talking about today is the 1970 Lincoln 1-cent coin with a D mint mark. That small D under the date tells us it was struck at the Denver Mint. On the surface, it looks just like millions of other Lincoln pennies. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial stands on the back. But the year it was made, the way it was produced, and the details hidden in plain sight are what make this coin interesting to collectors today. In 1970, the United States was in the middle of major social and economic changes. The Vietnam War was still ongoing, inflation was rising, and the price of metals was becoming a serious concern for the U.S. government. Just a few years earlier, pennies were made mostly of copper, but copper prices were climbing fast. The mint knew that changes were coming, and 1970 would be one of the last years before major experiments and adjustments in coin production. The Denver Mint struck a massive number of pennies in 1970. Over 2 billion Lincoln cents were produced there that year. Because of that huge number, many people assume the 1970 D penny must be worthless. But coin collecting is not just about how many were made. It's about condition, varieties, and small details that most people never notice. Let's take a closer look at the coin itself. The 1970 D penny is made mostly of copper, about 95% copper with small amounts of zinc and tin. It weighs just over 3 grams and has a smooth edge. On the front, you'll see Lincoln's portrait designed by Victor David Brenner, a design first introduced in 1909. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial design by Frank Gasparo appears, which was used from 1959 to 2008. At first glance, all 1970 D pennies look the same. But collectors pay close attention to the date, the mint mark, and the sharpness of the details. Some 1970 pennies are known for weak strikes, where Lincoln's hair or the memorial's columns appear soft or blurry. Others show unusually strong detail, which makes them more desirable. One of the reasons people get confused about the 1970 penny is because of a famous variety from the San Francisco Mint, the 1970s small date. That coin is truly rare and valuable. While the Denver version is not rare in the same way, it still benefits from the attention surrounding the 1970 date. Many collectors searching for the rare San Francisco coin end up learning about the Denver version as well. So why does the 1970 D penny still matter? The answer is condition. Most of these pennies were heavily circulated. They were used in everyday transactions, dropped on sidewalks, tossed into jars, and worn down over decades. Finding one today in near-perfect condition is surprisingly difficult. A 1970 D penny that has never been circulated, with full original red copper color, sharp details, and no major marks, can be far more valuable than most people expect. Coin grading services use a scale to measure condition, and pennies graded at the very top levels are extremely rare. In recent years, high-grade examples of the 1970 D Lincoln cent have sold at auctions for prices that surprise casual collectors. While most worn examples are worth only face value, a pristine, professionally graded 1970 D penny can sell for hundreds of dollars. In a few exceptional cases, coins with outstanding quality and color have sold for over $1,000 at major auctions. There are also error coins to watch for. Some 1970 pennies were struck slightly off-center, while others show doubling in the lettering or numbers. These errors happened during the minting process and were not intentional. Error coins are popular because each one is unique. Even small errors can add value, especially if they are clearly visible and well preserved. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 1970 penny. First, check the date carefully. The numbers should look clean and evenly spaced. Under the date, you should see a small D mint mark. It should look natural and part of the coin, not added later. Fake mint marks do exist, but they often look uneven, too large, or placed incorrectly. Next, check the weight. A genuine 1970 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A significantly lighter or heavier coin may indicate damage or tampering. Also examine the color. Original copper pennies have a natural reddish or brown tone. Coins that look unusually shiny or oddly colored may have been cleaned, which lowers their value. Another important tip is to never clean a coin. Cleaning removes original surfaces and can drastically reduce collector value. Even a dirty but original penny is usually worth more than a shiny, cleaned one. There are some fun and surprising facts about the 1970 penny. For example, this coin was made just before the U.S. Mint seriously began testing alternatives to copper. Only a few years later, pennies would change composition completely. That makes 1970 one of the last chapters of the classic copper cent era. Another interesting detail is that the Lincoln Memorial on the back actually shows a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the building. If you look closely, you can see him seated, making the Lincoln cent one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person on both sides. Collectors today love the 1970 penny not because it's the rarest coin, but because it represents a moment in time. It's affordable for beginners, challenging for condition-focused collectors, and connected to one of the most talked-about years in Lincoln cent history. For many people, finding a 1970 penny in great shape feels like discovering a small piece of history hiding in plain sight. It reminds collectors that valuable coins don't always look dramatic or ancient. Sometimes, they're the coins we've overlooked our entire lives. As you go through your change or old jars of pennies, take a moment to check the dates and mint marks. That ordinary-looking 1970 penny might not make you rich overnight, but it could open the door to a deeper appreciation of American coinage and the hidden stories behind everyday money. And here's something to think about. If a single penny from 1970 can still spark this much interest more than half a century later, what other coins are quietly waiting to be rediscovered? Because in the world of coin collecting, history doesn't disappear. It just waits patiently for someone to notice it. Imagine holding a coin in your hand that could be worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars, yet most people pass it by every day without noticing. A coin so ordinary in appearance, yet so rare in truth, that collectors around the world would pay top dollar just to own it. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating pieces of American coin history, the 1972 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. This small, copper-plated disc carries a story of history, mystery, and value that has captivated collectors for decades. The 1972 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running series of Lincoln cents, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By the 1970s, these coins were part of everyday life in the United States, used to buy groceries, pay tolls, or just saved in jars at home. Most people never gave a second thought to these pennies. Yet in 1972, a small number were produced in a way that makes them extraordinarily rare today. Normally, Lincoln pennies minted in Philadelphia carry no mint mark, while those minted in Denver display a D, and coins from San Francisco show an S. What makes the 1972 no mint mark penny unusual is that, despite its appearance as an ordinary Philadelphia coin, some examples show subtle variations and errors that are highly sought after by collectors. But before we get into that, let's explore the context of the coin's creation. The early 1970s were a time of change in the United States. The country had just left the gold standard, inflation was starting to rise, and the mint was experimenting with ways to manage coin production more efficiently. The Lincoln cent, made primarily of copper at the time, was still an essential part of daily commerce. In 1972, millions of pennies were struck for circulation, But among these, a few rare variations slipped through the production process. Some coins show doubling in the letters or numbers, others display an unusually sharp or weak strike, and a handful have errors in the placement of the mint mark. Or in the case of the Philadelphia coins, a missing mint mark that makes them especially interesting. The metal composition of the 1972 penny is also worth noting. At this time, pennies were still made mostly of copper, about 95%, with the remaining 5% composed of tin and zinc. This gives the coin its familiar reddish-brown hue, and it also affects how the coin wears over time. Because of its copper content, a well-preserved 1972 penny can look almost new even decades later, which makes spotting rare variations easier for collectors who know what to look for. So why is the 1972 no mint mark penny considered rare or valuable? There are a few reasons. First, error coins from this year are scarce. Coins that show doubling on the date or on the word Liberty, or those that have off-center strikes, are extremely limited in number. These subtle errors are not just mistakes, they are glimpses into the coin-making process, frozen in metal. Collectors prize them because they are one-of-a-kind snapshots of the mint's production history. A 1972 penny in flawless condition, or with certain errors, can command a price far above its face value. Real-world examples show just how much value can vary. A standard 1972 penny might only be worth a few cents if it has circulated heavily. But an uncirculated coin in perfect condition can fetch anywhere from $10 to $50 in collector markets. Certain error varieties, especially those with noticeable doubling or a rare die flaw, have been known to sell for hundreds, sometimes even over $1,000 at auctions. One particularly striking example involved a 1972 doubled die penny that sold for several $1,000s because it was certified as virtually flawless, with sharp, clear details that are almost impossible to find. For those interested in identifying a real 1972 no mint mark penny versus a counterfeit, attention to detail is crucial. Start by examining the date and the word Liberty on the front of the coin. Look for any signs of doubling, where the letters appear slightly thicker or seem to have a shadow. The mint mark, or lack thereof, is another key indicator. Philadelphia coins naturally carry no mint mark, but variations in spacing, alignment, or even the shape of the numerals can reveal an error that increases a coin's value. It's also wise to check the edges and overall weight of the coin. Authentic pennies from 1972 have a very specific weight and feel, and even slight discrepancies can indicate a fake or altered coin. There are also some fun and surprising details about the 1972 penny. For example, many collectors are fascinated by what is called the small date and large date varieties. These refer to subtle differences in the size and shape of the numbers in the date. While the average person might not notice, these tiny variations can have a big impact on value. Another interesting fact is that the 1972 penny is part of the Lincoln Cent series' long tradition of honoring Abraham Lincoln, who was the first U.S. president to appear on a circulating coin. This connection to history adds an intangible value that collectors often appreciate, beyond just the metal or the rarity of errors. Collectors love the 1972 no mint mark penny for more than just its monetary value. There is a sense of thrill in searching through rolls of coins to find a rare variation, a tangible connection to history in a coin that might have passed through dozens of hands before it landed in your collection. Each coin tells a story, not just of Lincoln, but of the people who made, handled, and saved it over the decades. The allure of finding a rare penny that could be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars is both exciting and deeply satisfying for collectors. It's a combination of history, mystery, and potential wealth all in one small, seemingly ordinary coin. As we wrap up, consider this. The next time you come across a 1972 penny, take a closer look. What may seem like just another coin from your pocket could be a hidden treasure, a tiny piece of American history with the potential to change the way you think about coins forever. Whether it's the subtle errors, the missing mint mark, or just the thrill of discovery, the 1972 Lincoln penny reminds us that even the smallest objects can hold extraordinary stories. So, as you reach for your loose change or sift through an old jar of pennies, remember that among those ordinary coins could be one of the rarest and most fascinating pennies ever minted in the United States. Keep your eyes sharp, your curiosity alive, and who knows, one of those tiny discs could be worth far more than you ever imagined. The 1972 no mint mark Lincoln penny isn't just a coin. It's a piece of history, a collector's dream, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest treasures hold the biggest surprises.